Welcome back to Direct Edition, a podcast about nothing and everything. I'm your host, Dave. Welcome back to the podcast. I just said that. Yeah, you did, Dave. All right. Well, now that we got that out of the way, hi, friends. I hope you enjoyed the Chris Farron interview last week. Always good to catch up with somebody and get to know them a little bit better at the same time. And that's my experience with Chris. Funny guy. I hope you checked out some of his music. There was a playlist attached to that podcast that you'll find in the description, I think, of no matter what streaming platform you're listening to it on. And if you catch him on tour and you get to meet him, tell him I said hi. So what else has been going on? Well, a lot of stuff. I mean, I'm not going to get into anything too currently heavy. You know, it's just not worth it. We did just kind of memorialize Ed Piskor on the 1 year anniversary of his passing. I was having coffee with Chris, my friend Chris, aka Comic Tropes, and he was saying that maybe instead of celebrating him on the anniversary of his death next year, maybe change it to his birthday, which I thought was a pretty good suggestion, pretty good idea, you know, celebrate the birth of somebody, not the death of, or, you know, not celebrate, but celebrate their birth instead of memorializing them on the day that they died. That's the best way to say it. And I think that's a pretty good idea. I think it's pretty sound. And yeah, so that was the most recent kind of thing that's been going on. And I just got finished out, like right before I hit record on this, I just finished watching the nearly I think it's like 3 seconds shy of 5-minute sneak preview of the new Superman movie, you know, James Gunn directing, and you know, his kind of like beginning of the new DCU. And it's interesting because I was never a Superman fan. You know, I liked the Christopher Reeve movies growing up. Obviously the first one came out, I believe, the year I was born. It came out in 79 or 78, whatever. But I saw them as a kid, and I think like every kid growing up who learns about Superman or sees the movie or whatever, the thing that fascinates you as a kid about Superman is the flying. You know, everybody imitates Superman flying. Everybody wants to fly. Who doesn't? I mean, I'm sure there are people out there that never dreamt of flying or, you know, imitated flying or whatever. But I think it's pretty natural that we would like to take flight for so many reasons, you know. And but I would never call myself like a huge Superman fan. I'm sure I was as a child. But Star Wars kind of took over everything. And then, you know, the evolution of, you know, becoming a Batman fan, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you know, all these different things, looking up to these action stars or fake action stars. You know, turtles aren't real. They're not. Anyway, but I did, you know, grow up watching the Christopher Reeve movies, and I loved him as a person. I always thought it was really cool. Like, he definitely seemed like he could really be Superman. And, but when you think about Superman, you think about the worldwide popularity of this character since the 30s, it starts to wane. And you watch this, what James Gunn's doing with these movies, or you watch what you see, if you get to see what James Gunn is doing with this movie, it definitely seems like he's going for that kind of like wholesome vibe, obviously modernized in cinema. I liked Man of Steel, the Zack Snyder movie. I realized that it definitely deviated from what Superman is generally known like. But I still like that movie because I mean, Henry Cavill was perfect as Superman. But what Gunn seems to be doing with this movie is kind of bringing it back, but also like paying heavy tribute to some stylistically, but also like just the vibe of what a 50s Superman was, you know, or an early, like 50s Superman, 60s Superman, 70s Superman was like in the comics, but doing more of a Christopher Reeve style movie. It just seems to be, looks like it's going to be very well-rounded and a very well made movie. And it just, yeah, I'm excited for it. I love the idea of DC kind of picking up steam. I love James Gunn. That man does no wrong. I mean, I had brunch with two friends today, friends of West Coast Davengers and personal friends, Trip and John. We were just talking about the Marvel and DC movies and all that. And James Gunn just seems to know how to do it all right. Three Guardians movies. The first one is, I think, a top 5 MCU movie. The second one, maybe a little bit of definitely a character building movie, not the best of the three. And then the third one was excellent, pulled directly at your heartstrings. But Gunn stuff has always been good. He makes schlocky horror, when he first started, like Slither, and he wrote the Dawn of the Dead remake that Zack Snyder directed. And, he's done a whole bunch of stuff with DC. Some has obviously yet to come out, but Creature Commandos already came out, and that was really good. I really like James Gunn. James Gunn, also a big Alex Pardee fan. So it comes full circle. James, I still want to have you on the program, even though your PR person told me you don't have time right now, and you're never going to hear this. But it's okay. I got to keep trying. So excited for that. And I today's podcast, I was going to tell a little bit of a story, and I'm going to tie it in to Superman, because Superman, right? He's truth, justice, the American way. He's the Boy Scout, even though he's not American, but he landed here, so I guess he is. If you ever want to read a really good Superman story, actually, I'll go into that real quick. If you really want to read a good Superman story, like a different take, Mark Miller, aka, if you look at his name, you say Mark Millar, but he's Scottish, so he's Miller. He wrote a book called Superman Red Sun. It was for DC Elseworlds, which is kind of not in continuity, so they can kind of do whatever they want with characters. But Superman Red Sun is basically, what if Clark Kent and his meteor, the ship from Krypton, crashed in Soviet Russia? Under the Soviet Union and all that. And what if he was a Russian propaganda piece, a Russian, superhero? Great story. It's been actually a long time since I've read it, and I have a copy of it on my shelf. So I think it's definitely due for a reread. If you're looking for some other good Superman stories to read, obviously All-Star Superman, which is what James Gunn is going to be taking from thematically. I think that's basically what he said for the new movie. All-Star Superman from Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely. There's Superman for All Seasons, which is Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, which will also it kind of pulls at your heartstrings. The great thing about that book, for All Seasons, each season is like a quarter of the story, right? And it's told from a different perspective. Each season is told from a different character's perspective. Now, if I'm remembering this correctly, it's Lana Lang, it's Lois Lane, it's Lex Luthor, and I think it's Ma and Pa Kent, or if it's Clark. I can't remember. But it's 4 different perspectives, so each season. It's just great. It's fantastic. There are some others, but those are the 3 that I would recommend. Birthright, I think that was one. Is that the Mark Waid one? Yeah. Trying to get this off the top of my head is not the easiest. As people have come to know about this podcast, not much written down. Today, I just wrote down a couple of notes because I just didn't want to forget to touch upon them. Truth, justice, and the American way. He's a Boy Scout. He's America. He's from small town. He everybody knows him in Smallville. Everybody knows, Clark Kent. And this is a story that I think I was going to tell like a month ago, but, things changed. Turned on the microphone, decided to talk about something else. Some of you, a lot of you that listen to this podcast know, some of you don't, that during the pandemic, I lost my job. And I ended up becoming a mail carrier for the United States Postal Service. I was a mailman. And I thought I'd talk about that a little bit because right now, with everything that's been going on. You hear rumors about, these schmucks in the office want to privatize the post office. They weaponized it in 2020. They weaponized it for the election. And it became a huge talking point because, Donald Moron, was saying, oh, voter fraud through the mail, and they're taking the ballots and they're doing all this stuff. And so they weaponized it, and it was a distraction. That's what they used it for. But most Americans understand, and most people around the world that have a structured postal service, like most countries do, Canada Post and the Royal Mail and whatever New Zealand's mail is, the Queen's Air Mail, I don't know. But most people understand the post office is not just like a necessary thing, but it's a service, and it's a service to the American people. It is for everybody. There is never, the mail, the USPS doesn't say, oh, we're not going to deliver to this town because they're whatever, and we're not going to go to this place. Like, the post office goes everywhere. And so during, leading up to the pandemic in 2019, after I had lost my job, with the CBLDF, that's a different story for a different day, and why I will never work in comics again for somebody else. But I had moved back to Seattle and was doing freelance. I was doing my event job that I had been doing since 2008. And March 17th, I want to say it was. I'm pretty sure that's the exact date. I was in Palm Springs with my ex, who wasn't my ex at the time, but I was working a pre-tournament. It was a pre-tennis event for the Indian Wells tournament, and it was a charity event. Anyway, everything's got canceled. There was like 8 people in Palm Springs, California that got COVID, and they just shut everything down. We went home to Seattle a couple days later, and I had a bunch of eBay sales that I had to package up, go to the post office. And so, I've been going to the post office on a regular basis for, at this point, 20 years. Let's just say 20 years. And so I go to drop the packages off, and I kind of stop and I look, and there's a little billboard because all the events that we had on the books started getting canceled very quickly, one by one. And then, it was like a blanket thing. You guys remember that in March, April of 2020. Nobody knew what was going on, and everybody was scared. And so I saw a posting in the post office that said, hiring carriers. And I went back to the apartment and I told her, and she was like, oh, you should fucking just apply. And, I hadn't applied for like a structured job like that in so long. I mean, the CBLDF, which that job I got in early 2019, that was 4 people working there. Working for my old job doing freelance. That was, I hadn't had to, I think 2015 was like the last time I had applied for a job. And that was an interesting one that I didn't get, but that was for an event management position at CenturyLink Field, where the Seahawks, the Sounders play, and, they have all these big concerts. But anyway, so I like procrastinated. I was like, I don't know. And like, those days in 2020, some of that shit just doesn't exist like that, or it blurs together, and I don't know. But I want to say it was like 2 or 3 days later that I applied, and the craziest shit. Like, you hear all these stories. I have friends that have been trying to get jobs with the post office in the late 90s and early 2000s, and like, I heard about the wait times and how long, and that's kind of why I procrastinated. I'm like, it's not going to happen. That it could be like a year before I even get called for an interview. Well, to make a long story short on that part, by the end of March, within a week, maybe 2 weeks, I was in training. They obviously, even at the time, I don't even know if it was the times in general, like pandemic, or if it was times in general, like Trump's presidency, 2016 to 2020, that that they were just hiring people. So I got drug tested. I don't think I had smoked any weed for, a couple weeks. They did a background check, fingerprints, like all that stuff. And, I'm not on any watch lists, or at least I wasn't at the time. And they fast tracked me. And I don't know why. I mean, it could have been my record. It could have been the fact that I spoke English, and maybe, it could have been race-based. I don't know. I have no way of proving that, because the post office isn't really like that. They'll take fucking anybody. So I was just that, but the fast track, like getting the job and being in training within 2 weeks is wild, because I talked to a couple people in training when we first got there, and some people said 6 months they were waiting, a year, 9 months. I told people like 2 weeks, and everybody's like, what? Could have been just right place, right time, that too. But it still baffles me to this day, talking about it. And so they do and once again, it's a little bit blurry. There was a lot going on, not just in the world, but personally, there was a lot going on. Oh God, I'm doing the Trump thing. And things weren't working out with me and her. And so I was like, I got to get out of here. So training was crazy. I had to rent a car for 3 weeks to drive down from Seattle to Kent to go to the facility, because I didn't own a car until I moved to Tacoma, and a couple years after this. I hadn't owned a car since I left Long Island, so 11 years without a car or something like that. And so I had to get up so early, like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. It was not what I was used to at all. I can't tell you I had to ever wake up on a regular basis that early in my life. Just not my thing. But training was like going to school, for a couple weeks. It's such a blur. They tell you so much information. You cannot retain more than 10% of it, because a lot of it's super boring. When they train you to drive and what to do to pull up, there's a ton of rules. Remember, this is a government job. It is not a branch of the government, but it is a government job. And so the rules are old. The rules are the rules. They tell you things like, you screw up, it's all your fault. The thing is with the post office, and I'm going to try not to make this too much of a negative telling about this, but there is a lot of negativity involved in the job. It's mostly in the management, the rules, and the union versus the union versus management, because it is a union job, and I am full support of unions, 100%. Just like anything that supports people, or anything that supports the workers, you have to understand it supports the workers no matter what, the good, the bad, the ugly. But so I think the school part of the training, like the learning and all that with the handbook, the handbook's like this thick, it was like 3 weeks. So I think I got the job March 30th, and I was on the street delivering, I think, a month later. What's cool is, so I got a job at the Inner Bay Annex in Seattle, which, if you're familiar with Seattle, it covers Lower Queen Anne and Magnolia, which was great because I had to do all this stuff, and I had to get a new apartment. I had to move out and get a new apartment and start this job. I found an apartment right by the annex. I took the bus to work. It takes me 5 minutes to get to work, 5 minutes to get home. So it was I tried to make this whole transition from working freelance in the events industry to working as a mail carrier, like a 9 to 5. We're going to call quotes 9 to 5, because that fucking shit is not 9 to 5. But I was ready to go, there's so much nuance in this job. There's so many, like I said, rules. But like I said, it's union, so you just have to understand what they can and can't make you do. Now, for anybody that listens to this podcast, anybody that knows me personally, you know the type of person I am, and the, let's just say, punk-leaning type attitude, not really establishment friendly, anti-establishment. So it's interesting. I don't remember my first couple of days really like the interactions because the annex is, it's like 60 something carriers. So let's say there's 70 people working in the annex. And, you know, that's a lot of people to meet, especially at a time where everybody's kind of solitary. I mean, we were in lockdown for the entire time that I was training. And luckily, it was uncertain times. I just remember the fact that I had to have a note from the U.S. Postal Service that if I were to get pulled over, I show them that, be like, I am an essential worker. That was also an interesting thing. At a time, once again, unprecedented, I was an essential worker to a T. Granted, I think they gave us like Class C essential workers. Like, motherfucker, we are motherfucker, as if there's one. Well, yeah. But yeah, seriously, we are on the street every day delivering mail. You remember all that toilet paper that people were getting? All that stuff you were getting in the mail? Yeah, that was us. And, Amazon, UPS, and FedEx, those are all privatized companies. Not a government job. But anyway, so the upside for U.S. Postal Service, right? Lots of upsides, especially at that time. Income, they start you off. God, I don't remember what I was making, like 12 something an hour, somewhere around there, 13 something an hour. I could be wrong about that. I don't want to go find my pay stubs. Benefits, once they kick in, they're pretty awesome. The union, obviously, talk about that a little bit too, but the union's the union. Being outside, good and bad. Seattle weather, I started in May. It's kind of the end of spring, beginning of summer, so I was starting in the best weather possible. And then I would have 6 months under my belt until the rainy season start, winter, etc. Which is good. That actually worked out real well until it didn't. Being around people also good, getting tons of exercise. I would say the average day I walked between 10 and 12 miles. Some days 16 miles, and all of those days mostly included 100 to 200 flights of stairs. Hills, all that stuff. Remember, Seattle is the city of 7 hills. And I worked on 2 of them. So the first couple of days, like I said, a blur, but I did meet some people very quickly that I gelled with very well. So what they have you do when you first start is you shadow a carrier. And what that is it's very simple. You go with a carrier in your little mail truck. You follow him. You watch what he does. He kind of talks to you, teaches you the ropes. And the guy that most CCAs, which is the position you start at, it's basically like, that's what the rookies are, CCAs. I shadowed Jeff. Jeff is the guy who opted to be the one carrier that everybody shadows. Nicest guy in the world. I feel bad that I haven't talked to him in a long time just because, I'm down here, he's up there. But, I went to his 60th birthday party, all this good stuff. Like, such a nice guy. And, he told me he's definitely a little bit more of he has to kind of keep the image of a rule follower somewhat, but we were shooting the shit. And I, come to find out after working with him for, 2 year or a year and a half, like, he's like, yeah, he's like, fuck this place. He was fully supporting me, doing what I needed to do to get out. But, I met some really awesome people when I worked there. I fell in with a good crowd of punk people, and Andrew and Aaron and Ronnie and David, other David. They I think, I don't even know how it started, but they kind of recognized that I was one of them. Not somebody to really take shit from management, although you really have to. Like, you get shit. There is, to use a buzzword, but it is really true. Like, not only is management abusive, not verbally as much as kind of like psychologically, but the gaslighting is unfucking real at the post office. And you ask any carrier that's maybe not been there for 35 years or 25 years, and they'll tell you. Had I had started at this job at 18, I'm 46. I'd be ready to retire in a couple years because that's like one of the very few jobs where you can truly retire. But when I started, I mean, like it was really tough. It was not just mentally exhausting, but it's physically exhausting. You have to learn so much, and as a rookie, you get bounced around routes. Luckily, like I said, I fell into a good crowd, and David, who really kind of took me under his wing, he's a very sarcastic man, but as we got to know each other, very nice human being to the core. But he's like, he's like, he would just kind of walk around and tell me things, and at the annex would tell me like, yeah, they can't really do that to you, but you're going to have to do it. I got on this route in a neighborhood called Magnolia in Seattle, which if you've been to Seattle, you know Seattle. It's one of the most beautiful neighborhoods in Seattle. A lot of old money there, people that worked for Microsoft in the 80s that retired, some young families there, right on the water, right by one of the most beautiful parks in Washington, Discovery Park. Some of you would recognize Discovery Park if you know the Hunger Strike music video from Temple of the Dog, because that beach where Eddie and Chris Cornell and all them, that's Discovery Park. Anyway, I'm going hungry. So he got me on this route that he kind of customized, and it's so interesting because like the nuance, like I said, of the post office, I won't go into it, but he showed me the way to do it, and it was a great workout, beautiful, awesome route. I got to know a lot of the people on the route. It's just one of those things. And during COVID, especially because of this, because people were in lockdown or they were working from home, or in the case of older people, like they were, the whole thing is like, if older people get COVID, they're going to get either real sick or they're going to die, or both. And yes, in that order, they don't die and then get sick. So I got to know people got to know me. The reason why I was on this route was because one of the older carriers who was on that route was getting surgery, and he was getting like a knee replacement. So he's out for like 6 months, and they liked him, even though he was like a surly Santa Claus, but they liked me because I was like a surly young Santa Claus. And I was a rookie, but I was friendly. And the thing is, the thing I'm most proud of, and the thing that really makes me look back on this time fondly, is the time and place. During COVID, maybe I was the only person that people saw every day. These were the only people I was seeing kind of regularly. I didn't really hang out with anybody. Like most of my friends kind of like, they kept, if they work from home, they kept to their bubble. I made a lot of friends at the post office, so I was around people. I was social. I wasn't going crazy like a lot of people were. I mean, we can all, wind back the clock in our memories to that time and feel how some of us were going crazy, and, relationships were going up in smoke. Marriages were going up in smoke. Friendships were going, like so much was happening. So it was really nice to be out there. I very quickly, within, like 3 months, was in the best shape of my life. Upstairs, downstairs, up hills, down hills, 12 miles a day, 14 miles a day. I'd go home and it was like amazing. I'd order like delivery, fried chicken, eat like a fried chicken meal, like a half a pint of ice cream, and I'd still be hungry, and I'd, just wash, rinse, repeat the next day. So that was really nice, but that was also at the expense of my health. I was working. So when you start as a CCA, they tell you, oh, you could, some weeks you might have to work 50 hours a week. That's a fucking bullshit. I was working 60 hours a week. Some weeks I had to work 70 hours. Yeah, because I was working 6 days a week. Because what most people don't realize about the post office in major cities, you don't really see, I don't think you see this in the suburbs too much. But major cities, because the United States Postal Service has the largest fleet of vehicles in the country, Amazon contracts USPS to do Sunday deliveries for them. And who does those Sunday deliveries? The CCAs, the young guys, the new guys. I was not young. I was 40 years old. I had a lot less gray in this beard, let me tell you. I'll flash a picture, you'll see it. And so Sundays we had to go to a neighborhood called Ballard, which is where the biggest annex is on that side of Seattle. And we'd get there in the morning and we'd get a route and we'd have to load up this truck with all these Amazon packages and deliver them. Now, when I first started doing it, I was like, oh, this is terrible. Like, it always was bad. But I didn't realize the amount of fuck off I could do during Sundays. It took me a couple months to realize, like, oh, well, if I finish all of these 100 and whatever packages in sometimes 200 packages, sometimes 300, depending on the time of the year. If I finish it in 5 hours, they're going to, when I come back and finish, they're going to be like, oh, you still need, this person needs help, so you got to go do that. So what I would do, I would load up the truck. I'd go get a bagel at Schmaltzy's, have some breakfast. Then I'd start on my way, drive around, throw packages on people. Oh, God, I was ruthless with the Amazon shit. If you live in a major city, you better hope that somebody like me isn't delivering your fucking Amazon packages on a Sunday, because I give zero, maybe even negative amount of fucks about your fucking package. You know why? Because Amazon's just going to replace it. Anyway, throwing packages on porches, driving, taking like 10-minute breaks, doing that. So I learned how to fuck off pretty hard on Amazon Sundays, but it still sucked. That means, I'd have my one day off a week. That's it.
Hey boys and girls, this is your friend, Santa Mailman. You want some mail? You want some mail? Here's some fucking mail for you.
But once I got on this route in Magnolia for, I was on it for a couple of different chunks for like 2, 3, 4 months or 2 months, whatever. I mean, it seemed like longer because it's every day. I got to know the people. You see a lot of carriers with the earbuds. They tell you you're not allowed to. They tell you you have to wear the uniform. I started cutting sleeves off shirts. I was wearing these really athletic shorts because I wasn't wearing their like polyester bullshit shorts that like rip and you sweat your ass off. Like, I was like, I want to feel comfortable while I'm doing this. They tell you got to get these certain shoes. They were all bad for my feet, so I started wearing Hoka's at the suggestion of somebody. I actually got a doctor's note. Like, I went to see a podiatrist because I have flat feet. I got an insole, and I was wearing Hoka's, and like my life improved. And one of the things that's terrible about the post office, if you injure yourself, no matter what it is whatever the injury is, if you get attacked by a dog, they blame it on you. Like, they do everything to fault the carrier, so that they don't have to be beholden to a lot of the medical bills if you get hurt, and the union fights for you. I'll talk about my injury, but when I started, I was in the summer. It was great. I became one of those carriers that I bought a Bluetooth speaker, attached it to my bag, my satchel, and I listened to music. I did not want to do the headphones things because I wanted to be aware. I wouldn't blast it too loud. Some days, if Dave was in a mood, he'd be blasting Deftones, walking around. And you know what? Yeah, I would say 95% of the people I interacted with would always smile at me when they saw me walking around listening to music. In the mornings, I'd listen to softer stuff or quieter stuff, Phoebe Bridgers, or if it was like a moody Seattle day, I'd put on some Mad Season or Mark Lanigan, just something like chill. It didn't, like, I wasn't listening to depressing music because I was depressed. It's just like, that's my chill music. But I'm trying to think of some of the albums that came out while I was there. The Deftones Ohms came out, Phoebe Bridgers' Punisher, Bartees Strange Live Forever, Run the Jewels 3, I think, came out then. I think it was 3 or 4. That I would only listen to in the truck because, like, I also had to realize, like, Deftones is aggressive, but they have some, like, not super aggressive parts of that album. But I feel like Run the Jewels, especially because of its lyrical content, being very politically charged and socially charged, I felt like that was a little aggressive to listen to while walking up to people's houses. So I listened to it in, the truck doing Amazon deliveries. So yeah, I tried to vibe with stuff that made sense to listen to while outdoors. But anyway, I was that mailman, and I made a lot of friends that way. Always talk to people. Every once in a while you encounter somebody that like they start talking to you about the current state of the world in 2020 or 2021, and once or twice I interacted with somebody that was a Trump supporter. They stopped talking to me very quickly once they realized I wasn't having that shit, especially at that time where he was trying to blame the post office for everything, and DeJoy, he put DeJoy in, and they're, all that shit. It was all bullshit. So anybody that wants to clap back at me, I'll shut you down. But during that summer of 2020, I can't remember what month it was. I'm gonna put some pictures. You're gonna see some pictures of what I was seeing at the time. But we had really terrible wildfires all over. It was Canada, it was Eastern Washington, and there were the big ones in Oregon. And the Canada ones were pretty bad too, because that was that summer that I think New York, the East Coast, got a lot of the wildfire smoke. Well, let me tell you something, friends. One thing you don't think of, because I've never lived in a wildfire place until 4 or 5 years after I moved to Washington, where we had our first bad ones because of, that climate change hoax. And let me tell you, folks, the mail doesn't stop. You want to talk about, the whole bullshit of pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, there is nothing more American abusive than the USPS slogan, rain, nor sleet, nor snow, nor ice, we will deliver. They also forget to mention wildfires. Yeah, the Postal Service doesn't stop if there's wildfires. I think an earthquake, hurricane, or tornadoes might actually be the only thing that stops it. But maybe not, because the USPS doesn't give a shit about the carrier. They don't even give a shit about the mail. They just care about the bottom line. Anywho, so we all had to deliver the mail during all these wildfire smokes. Now, the wildfires weren't in Seattle, but the smoke was. And as you see in some of these photos, you were like damned if you do, damned if you don't. The mask on with the respirator. You like within a half hour, you start to feel lightheaded because you're walking, you're exerting yourself heavily while wearing this thing that is kind of like making your breathing a little bit harder. And then you take the mask off and your throat starts hurting. So it's like there was no winning. It was like I was taking the mask off, I was putting it on, I was sitting in the car. There was nothing you could do. It was pretty miserable. Yeah. And obviously you feel bad for anybody that has to be outside, but we were all out there. A very interesting experience happened twice that summer, but nevertheless, she persisted. So I get thrown around every once in a while to a different route. They make you work extra. The worst is, and I want to preface this by, if you live in a place where you see your carrier, doesn't even have to be that often, but you know who your carrier is, tip them during fucking Christmas. Tip them. Cash is the best. Even $20 in an envelope to your carrier, $30, a gift card to a local coffee shop, whatever it is. Why? Well, let me tell you about the Christmas season. My first Christmas season was, end of November into December of 2020. And I was working 70 hours. I was working well into the night. I was going to help out because at this point I had 6 months under my belt. I was very good at my job. I knew the routes. I knew what to do. I knew how to help. I adapted to this job very, very quickly. Honestly, if things didn't go the way that they went in my time there, I could have definitely have done this for a decade and a half and been great at it. I made, I'm just skipping ahead a little bit, but I made regular in a year, which is at that time was not really super common. But anyway, that first Christmas season, like I was on that route, you just get so many packages. Like, the parcels, really do make up the mail now, especially because of Amazon. Like, you don't get that much mail anymore, but you get your packages. So we were just doing, I would get in at like 6 in the morning and I would be done at like 8 o'clock in the night at night. And the sun goes down over here on the West Coast at fucking 5 o'clock at night in that, at that time of year. But I'll never forget, this might have been the worst work experience in my life. It was like 2 days before Christmas. Let's just say it was 2 days before Christmas. It could have been 4, it could have been 3. And we got one of these just like very unheard of torrential downpour nights in December. And Magnolia is situated, like I said, on the water. It's probably 100 feet or so above sea level. It's actually like a pretty high point. So the winds come in. It started torrential downpouring around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I could see it coming. I could see the wind was blowing, and I could just see it coming. It was like, the scene in Spider-Man where Toby and Kirsten kiss, the upside down kiss in the rain, and they're both drenched. And it was like that in 5 minutes. I was out there for another 4 hours. I would get out of the van, and instantly whatever mail was in my hand just clumped. It just clumped. So what I did was I was like, this is the most miserable I've ever been, because it was probably like 35 degrees out. I was in the van crying because I didn't know what to do. Because like if you go back there and you don't deliver the mail, you got to go back out. Like I said, it is extremely, extremely mentally abusive. It is a very abusive system that the management runs. It's not the carriers, it's the managers. And so at one point I'm sitting in the van. I am soaked to the bone. Like there is no part of me that isn't drenched. It's like somebody put me underwater. I looked across the street. There was one of these houses with those like kind of tin metal roofs, whatever it is. I don't know what the material is, like a newer house. And the wind was whipping so hard, there were waves of water coming off of the roof of this house. I could tell you exactly where it is. Like I could drive there right now if I wanted to, but it's 10 o'clock at night on a Thursday. And so I'm just like, you know what? Fuck this. I started scanning packages, and I literally would just pull up to the house and get the package delivered and run back into the van. And I did this until about like 6:30 at night. Maybe 7 o'clock at night. And I was like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm done. I actually texted my friend Ronnie and I told her, I'm like, I'm going to fucking quit. Like, I'm never doing this again. That's the kind of job that it is. You just have these moments where you're like, I'm fucking done. More than you don't. But anyway, I didn't quit. I did bring a ton of mail back that was destroyed pretty much. And they looked at me. I'm like, what? Look at it outside. That's the type of person I became. Is like, I knew that they couldn't do anything to me at that point. I was like, what? You really can't get fired from the post office. Like, the union will get your job back. I've heard stories that, like, obviously if you kill somebody or whatever, but like stealing, people have gotten caught and the union got their jobs back just to get their back pay. So yeah, that was the first Christmas. But that being said, even though I was not a regular, I still got like maybe $500 in tips because I had been on that route for a bunch of months. I even got to make friends with a lot of dogs. I want to give a shout out to Sherman. He's a Great Pyrenees mix, but they call him a Gubernese. I'll put a picture of Sherman on the screen here, but big dog, the most lovable dog. Still follow him on and the family on Instagram. There was that one section of this route that they all knew me, and I would just hang out there. Even just if I was taking a break, I'd go out, and if Sherman was like looking out the window and he saw me, he'd get all happy, and they'd let him out. Such a lovable dog. yeah, and that was like, those were the positives, the getting to know the people and them getting to know me, and just, being a part of this neighborhood. And even, there was really never another route that I was on for long enough. I did Jeff's route every once in a while, and I was on it for a couple weeks, which was good. It was a lot of work. But it was still, and I can't say that it wasn't. It was a very emotionally fulfilling job, the act of carrying the mail. Once you get out on the street, because the thing is, you have to get to the annex and, set the case and do all that stuff. And then so you're there for like anywhere between an hour to 2 hours. And that's when they drill it into you. It's just terrible. They treat you like shit, and they beat you down, and they gaslight you. They tell you like, the whole like blaming you for something that's not your fault, and then sticking with that is the worst part. Now, I think it was January. I don't think it like I said, timeline's messed up. It might have actually been before Christmas, some point in that 9 to 12th month that I was there. I don't know if you order dog food off Amazon. They come in these large boxes. These 35-pound bags of dog food come in a box that's almost maybe 1.5 times the size. I used to call them baby coffins because, they're like child's coffin size. And one day I went to pick one up, and it was lopsided. And I just didn't know how heavy it was going to be until I picked it up. And as soon as I grabbed it and lifted it, I just felt something in my back go. And it hurt so much, like I fell to my knees, and I was like tears in my eyes. That's how much it hurt. It turns out that I sprained my back, pretty bad. And I was out for like 2 weeks, I think. And sure enough, they blamed me. They wrote me up. They said it was the shoes, or they said I didn't bend down right, even though nobody saw me bend down. So how could they know, And from what I remember, I bent down the correct way, but it didn't matter because I didn't know how heavy it was, and it was lopsided. And it's like it's like going to pick up like a bag of groceries, and you don't realize that there's a 40-pound turkey in there. So you just don't know. And so I ended up, like it was a whole fucking thing. I had to file a grievance, and I had to get back pay, and, I had to go to physical therapy. It was all fucked up. Luckily, I didn't have to have surgery. Long story short, here we are, 4.5 years later, and I would say my back's like 95% fine. Especially because I don't do that stuff anymore. And then sometimes if I'm sitting somewhere for a while or in the wrong position, I can feel it, but it's not as bad as it was, because this injury basically plagued me for a little over 2 years. But yeah, I had so many instances with having to deal with the management in such a negative way. I fought to get my COVID back pay that they were supposed to give us, and they just try to do everything so that you can't, or you have to fight to get what is owed to you in so many different ways. But it was still like I had a lot of fun. I got to have a lot of fun. I would drive around, and this is at a time, like I said, where most of my friends were either furloughed, working from home, or out of a job. So I would really kind of like be posting fun stuff and sending videos to friends and like making them feel better. I have so many videos, and maybe I'll throw one in here right here.
Penny whistle! Hogwash! I'm a mailman! God damn it, not a doctor! Ring ding dong, ring a ding 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 dong. I am a mailman. Dun 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 dun. Vote for me for class president 73. Yeah.
Of me like driving the van and like singing and like just doing stupid stuff and like dancing in the truck and shooting videos. Like there were days where like I was having a ball, and a lot of it was to offset how miserable I was working for the USPS. Now, telling you I was working 60 hours a week is no lie. After 40, you make time and a half. But still, like, what good is making a whole bunch of money when you're A, miserable, and B, there's nowhere to spend it? You know, I was making incredible money, but it was at the expense of working so much and really draining myself. Like I said, it was the best I ever was in shape, but at what cost, right? So, mixed emotions, but mostly in the regard of pride. I was very proud to be doing that at that time. But we get to the summer of 2021, and I'm pretty sure the country kind of dealt with this all around. Like, we had some terrible heat waves. Once again, climate change hoax, right? Because it's not real. I'm joking. It's very real. It's very serious. It's been serious for a while. But we had some deadly fucking heat waves. And also, let's give you a little topography of Magnolia. It basically, if you're going from downtown Seattle to Magnolia, you have to go over a bridge. You go up a big hill, then you go down. Like, the center of Magnolia is almost like a valley, and then you go back up. So during these heat waves, being in certain parts, it was a little less hot, but being in that valley, I remember it was July of 2022 or maybe June of 2021. And I got to somebody's house on this route I was on. It was a relatively easy route that I had gotten on for the last couple months that I was at the post office, because the route was vacant and I was trying to actually get the route when I turned regular. But I get to this one person's house that's basically like 3/4 the way done of the route. And that person had a thermometer on their patio, like an outdoor thermometer. At, I think it was 1:30 in the afternoon. I probably have a picture of it. If not, you just have to trust me. It was 103 degrees at this person's house. 103 degrees. Now, we're not Arizona, okay? Arizona, Florida, certain parts of the country, you get used to it. And also, everywhere is air conditioned. You can go in anywhere. The Northwest doesn't do air conditioning because you barely need it 2-3 weeks out of the year. That's changing, but... and I was like, man, I was sweating so fast, no matter how much water I drank, it was just coming right out of me. But, I was wearing sleeveless shirt. I was wearing shorts. Like, I was somewhat comfortable, especially because I knew I was almost finished. So I finished up the route and I got back to the annex around 2:00. And they made me go back out to finish somebody else's route. I was like, this is fucking bullshit. So I get home at like 4:30. Get into my apartment. It's probably 107 degrees in there. No air conditioning. Doesn't matter if the windows are open or closed, right? I went to take my shoes off and the floor was so hot. Hardwood floors. I couldn't stay in my apartment. So I went down to the water and just basically, it was like very miserable for everybody in the city. We had another heat wave about 3 weeks later. And I want to say this was into like towards the end of January. July. And I finished the route and they did it again to me. And it was like 6 degrees hotter than it was that previous one. It was like 107 degrees out. And they made me finish somebody else's route. It was Jeff's route. And I get to this one apartment complex that's like this really cute kind of like 80s, 90s apartment complex. And just happened to be delivering the mail to somebody that was a carrier in another neighborhood in Wallingford. And him and his girlfriend or wife were coming home. He was already done. He's like, yeah, I'm a carrier. They let us come in at like 6:00 in the morning and start and get out on the street before it gets really hot because they didn't want us to all get heat exhaustion. I'm like, yeah, well, and he saw how much I was sweating. He's like, let me give you some ice water. So I was supposed to be off the next day. And they made me come in. And it was second day of the heat wave. And that was the day that I decided I'm done. Like, there is absolutely no interest in the well-being of the carriers. You don't care. You don't. And that was the linchpin. I had gone on my first West Coast Davengers road trip a couple months before. And so I hit Dave up and I'm like, dude, you want to go? Like, I'm going to go just take 5 days off and come down to San Francisco and hunt books. And I did. And then I think I burned the rest of my time, and then I put my 2 weeks in, and burned the rest of the time. But that was it. I was done. I just had enough. I had so many arguments with them. Management, I had grievances that I filed. They had filed grievances against me. I had made tons of friends. It was, like I said, it's a mixed bag of emotions. It will always be, but the act of carrying the mail, the friends that I made, great. I still hang out with Aaron. I still talk to him, and I talk to some of the other people sometimes. I just don't get up there that often anymore to Seattle. But it was, and then I'll continue this story at some other point, because like there is one job in between this that leads into the West Coast Avengers and where I am now. But, it all kind of starts with the crumbling of the CBLDF job and then becoming a mailman, and, it kind of all goes from there. But it's interesting how I'm able to map certain things in my life out. And this is one of them. If you're young and you start at the post office young, even in your early 20s, like, you're set. If you can get past that first couple of years and you can get on a good route, man, you're in the clear. Like, you can retire because they put so much money into that pension. But they're still going to weaponize the post office. You're going to hear a lot more about it, especially whenever they're going to try and get it before the next election. But if they don't privatize it, which I would imagine you can't fuck with the biggest. I don't know if they're the biggest union in the U.S., but you've got the most workers that have access to all of these things. Like, you don't want to piss off the post office. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people in the post office that maybe support the current administration, but once they start getting their jobs fucked with, none of them are going to support that. But anyway, it's not all bad, but I advise not to work for the post office, but I advise you to listen to me and think about it. But if you're young, it's not a bad choice, especially with those health benefits. It's unfortunate that you have to make job choices almost solely based on that. I buy my own health insurance now, and it's fucking expensive. But anyway, I got to know Seattle like super intimately at a time where there was not a lot going on. And so it's a very interesting time. There's so much more I'm leaving out, but it's been an hour already. So I think I'm just kind of glad in a way that I had that experience. Like I said, very proud that I got to do it. Just to kind of say it out loud, I stand with my postal, brothers and sisters, every single one of them, the good, the bad, the ugly. Not really big into a lot of the union people, but some of them were really good. And then some of them were just super complacent and lazy, and they're like kind of management stooges. But, I can't stress this enough. Even if you've had some bad days getting your mail, don't blame the carriers. Some of them are bad apples. There are some things that we all have bad days, but honestly, like, they are the hardest working people. They eat so much shit, literally, maybe even figuratively. Or figure, you know what I'm saying. But tip them, say hello to them, offer them, if it's a hot day, like, say, can I get you water? Like, if you work from home and you're going to see your carrier, like, that shit really does make a difference, especially like during COVID, people leaving baskets of snacks out for the postal workers. I would literally have, I'd actually have people like come out and be like, oh, can I get you anything to drink? Do you want to like come in for a minute, cool off, like that type of stuff. And, it really does make a difference. So, Yeah, I can definitely say you can change somebody's day in a good way. Thank you for listening to that little piece of my life. And I think, it's something that I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to wait until I felt like talking about it. And like I said, there's probably some stuff that I left out that just jettisoned out of my mind. And once again, thank you for listening to this podcast. This is episode 54 overall, I believe. And we're slowly coming towards that 60th episode, which will signify the end of the third season. So I needed to take this 2 weeks off previously just to kind of recalibrate my brain and all that. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast on the platform of your choice, what are you waiting for? This is the time to do it. Shout out to all of the new subscribers, all the old subscribers, all the ones that leave the comments and the reviews, which you can do. You can leave a review on Spotify if you scroll up to the top. Star rating on Apple, you can give a rating, and you can also write a review. On YouTube, you could hit the like button and drop a comment, etc., etc. Spread this podcast out. And that's going to be it for this episode of Direct Edition. I hope you have a great week. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you on the other side. I don't know. I don't know what I was fucking doing there.